Are you considering buying a property in France, but overwhelmed by all of the information out there? Maybe wondering, how do you even know what you need to know to make your dream become a reality? If so, you're in the right place. Welcome. I've been there too. I had bought and sold properties outside of France, and I really thought I knew what I was doing. Maybe you're in the same situation. But I did not know where to look. I'm sure I missed out on potential options. My French wasn't very good, and I didn't really understand how to use the French language websites, let alone make best use of them. Maybe you find yourself in the same situation at the moment. I drove around France for 10-hour days on viewing trips, booked too many appointments, and didn't really know how anything worked. Had I known what I do now, both from that experience of buying, but also from working with and helping hundreds of people buy property in France, I know it would have improved my experience. Don't get me wrong, buying a property in France is an adventure, and it definitely should be, but I think I would have wasted less of my own time, I think I would have saved myself some money, and I definitely would have been less stressed. Now, there is a lot of information out there already. I see it. Often, it's from a real estate agent whose ultimate goal is to sell you one of their properties so they make their commission. It is not in their interest to tell you everything. There's also information out there from government websites and French notaires. They're only giving some facts. They're not able to put them into a useful context for you. And also, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of free information out there which is just out of date or just wrong. That is why French Property Focus exists, to be a resource you can rely on for everything related to buying a property in France. During this webinar, I'm going to take you through some mistakes I've seen many times over the years and draw out some key learning points for you. Maybe you're just at an early stage of thinking about a purchase. Well, you will get a brief overview of some of the key points to consider, and it might help you decide what you want to do. Maybe you've already been looking online, or you're looking to book a trip later in the year. Well, you'll get some really useful tips on mistakes to avoid. You might even be in a situation where you've done visits and you're thinking about making an offer. If that's you, then you'll hear a key insider tip that might save you some money. Whatever stage you're at, you're going to learn some of the basics about how the French property market works, differences to the US market, with lots of hints and tips on how you can best navigate it. Then I'm also going to talk a little bit about a paid course we have, which is all about optimizing your search for a property in France and giving you lots of tips, insider knowledge, and best practice. Okay, let's dive in with mistake number 1 not to make. I've got my own lawyer, I don't need a French notaire. So this is one where you can waste your own time and money. Why do I say that? Well, let's find out. We've worked with the US buyers who are used to dealing with their own advisors and the way that they have done things for years in the US. You might also currently be thinking that. I've had a buyer before engage their US-based lawyer and tell me, don't worry, they speak French, so I don't need to use this French notaire that you've suggested. Just send everything to them. Oh, and by the way, their fee was much cheaper than what you estimated the French notaire was going to charge. Where do I begin with this? So a French notary or notaire has much stronger powers and a much larger role than an American notary. In France, a property purchase cannot legally happen without at least one French notaire being involved. They're state-appointed officials required by law for all property transactions. They verify title, handle funds, register deeds, and ensure tax compliance. These are functions that cannot be performed by a foreign attorney or lawyer or by a French lawyer. The fees that French notaires collect are always to be covered by the buyer, and they not only cover the cost of all the legal checks and contracts and paperwork, but they also cover the relevant government taxes that are collected as part of the property purchase process in France. Okay, so now you know that you have to use a French notaire and a little about what they do. You can appoint your own rather than using the seller's. It's entirely your choice at no extra fee. If there are 2 notaires working on a property transaction, they just share the fee. Notaires have a legal obligation and professional duty of care to provide advice on all aspects of the property purchase, including inheritance and including all the relevant clauses that you might need to include for your specific circumstances. We've also seen a similar thing, for instance, with people saying, oh, my brother or my sister is a real estate agent in the US, so I should only need to pay half the French agent's fee. Well, no, it doesn't work like that at all. It's a totally different market. Lots of knowledge you've built up over the years as an experienced US buyer can be very useful to you still. But lots of things are just so different, unless you learn about those differences, it's easy to make a mistake. Now you know a little bit about the role of notaires. Their fees can vary between about 7% to 11% on a transaction, and this can depend on the location of the property and which French department that's in. That fee is on top of the list price that you see in any advertisement. I'll talk a little bit later about a course we have on optimizing your property search, but as I say, this fee is in addition to the list price, so good to know when you're putting together your budget and starting your search. So here we are at mistake number 2 not to make. This is all the issues in the diagnostic report need to be fixed before sale. This is one where misunderstanding this could definitely cause you some extra stress, maybe some money, but I've also seen it almost blow a deal before signing. Firstly, you might be sat there asking yourself, what even is a diagnostic report? Well, they're a bit like a US home inspection report, but also I'd have to say they're not at all like a US home inspection report. Diagnostic reports are a full package of information that are a legal obligation on the seller as part of any property sale in France. They can be hundreds of pages long and cover key areas such as natural environment risks like flooding or seismic activity, electricity, if there's lead, if there's asbestos, if there are termites, if there's a pool, it will cover pool security. If gas is installed in the property, there'll be something on the gas installation, and also the energy efficiency of the property. That is the type of heating that's in the property, and also the level and amount of insulation that's in the property. They're there to provide information to interested buyers, but not to create an obligation on the seller or the buyer to fix any issue. It's market practice that the recommendations in these reports, even for what you might think are quite big safety issues, they're not fixed by the seller, but instead they can be a point of negotiation on the price of the property. Don't go thinking all major issues that are highlighted in the diagnostic report must be resolved before closing. In one real life example, I've seen a buyer the deal was agreed. The notaire contacted them to ask them to pay the deposit before the first contract signing. They said that they weren't going to pay until they had confirmation that all of the issues in the electricity diagnostic had been fixed. This was a surprise to everybody else, and even though they'd been told about it and had the reports, they'd only just got around to looking at them. Ultimately, they had to pay and the transaction went through, but if they'd listened and paid attention to the advice that they'd been given, it would have saved them some stress, and everyone else on the deal. Use diagnostic report findings as a negotiation point rather than a deal breaker. Depending on when the diagnostic reports are provided to you as the buyer, before or after negotiation, you might be able to renegotiate the offer without causing the seller any upset. The only report that has to be done before you view or before the property is listed is the energy efficiency one. It's always good practice to have all the diagnostic reports done before the property goes on market, but sometimes sellers don't want to do that until they get an offer. But then that does give you an opportunity, if something is found that wasn't known about, it's a good opportunity to renegotiate a price. Lastly, you might think that these diagnostic reports cover the structure of the property. That would be a perfectly normal thing to think. They absolutely don't. They don't cover anything in relation to the structure of the property. If you want extra work done, like a structural survey, that can be arranged, but you as the buyer would be the one to arrange for it, and you as the buyer would be the one to pay for it. There are English-speaking structural surveyors in France, and sometimes people even contact somebody in the UK and they fly out to France. More often than not, we see people do a little research,
find out the cost of getting one of these reports. It can run into the thousands. And also, they ask around and find out that nobody really ever gets them done on any transaction in France, and ultimately maybe decide against having that extra work done. What some people do though is they find an English-speaking builder if their French isn't up to it, and they do a tour of the property that they're interested in with a builder. He might point out certain issues. He might give you an idea of the cost. If you're worried about anything, it's a good idea. Probably your agent can put you in touch with somebody local who might do it. Sometimes if they have to travel far, they might charge for like a full written report and like a day of their time. If they're close by, they might do a walk around with you for half an hour for no cost. It's something you'd have to organise, or with the help of your agent organise. And also the diagnostics, if you don't get them before you make an offer, and then something comes up, you can just walk away. I've certainly walked away from property before after I made an offer because the diagnostics weren't done, and when they came back, there were termites, and it was an issue that I just did not want to deal with. I'll talk to you a little bit later about a course we have optimizing your property search. In that course, you'll learn about how the energy efficiency report can be a tool for you in more ways than you might think. More on that later. We're on to number 3, mistakes not to make. I'm going to bid over asking price to secure this property. You've probably bought and sold properties before, maybe multiple times. You might have bid over asking price to win a property in the US. You might even have been part of a bidding war for a property in the US. When you find your perfect property in France, you might worry about getting involved in another bidding war overseas and think the best way to secure it is to offer over asking price. You will be making a mistake. For various cultural reasons and market norms, French properties are often listed at or above market value. Some market statistics even estimate that around 78% of French properties sell below asking price. That's the price when first listed. Instead of bidding higher, focus on a clean offer with minimal conditions. Many properties in France are sold by multiple agencies because exclusive listings are quite rare. And therefore, you as the buyer rarely have the full picture of what other interest there is in the property. And none of the agents will either. Additionally, how long a property has been on the market or its price reduction history can also be a bit murky. Our advice is to trust your gut. If you love a property, offering full asking price with a quick timeline is typically sufficient to secure it. Here's the one thing most other guides won't tell you. There's a French law that governs French real estate agencies, and it inserts a unique clause in all contracts between sellers and French real estate agencies. The clause states that if the broker brings a cash buyer who provides a full asking price offer, the agency has fulfilled its mission and its agency fees are due. This in effect helps guarantee there can be no real bidding wars in France, as the first cash buyer that puts in a full asking price offer with an agency should win. In fact, French estate agents and brokers have the right to sue the seller if the seller decides that they don't want to move forward with that full asking price cash offer, and cases have come to court on this point, although most agencies would avoid doing that for the potential bad press. A word of warning though, I have seen an example where this hasn't worked out at all. There was an example where a sale had been agreed in France, but the buyers were relying on selling a property to fund the deal. Their sale fell apart, and so the deal fell through, and the property in France went back on the market. New cash buyers were found who very quickly made a full asking price offer. Now we've just learned that this should have been enough to secure the deal for them, right? Well, in this case, unfortunately for them, it wasn't. And this was a deal for just under €1 million. In the meantime, the original buyers managed to get another offer on their property, and the sellers in France decided to stick with them. This might be another thing you find surprising about viewings in France. Often, and often against the advice, the owners will be present at the viewings and sometimes will follow you around and ask you questions, and you will definitely meet some of the owners of properties that you view when you come to France. In this case, the sellers were very charmed by the original buyers and became friends with them, and the agency didn't want to formally sue for the fees. There's always an exception. There are lots of differences when searching for a property in France. I'll be talking later about a course we're running just on this and how to optimise your search. But if you do meet the owners on a visit, it's always good to make a good impression. Okay, so here we are. Mistake number 4 not to make. I need to have euros ready in an account when I make an offer. This one definitely could cost you some money. You might think you need to put down a deposit at the time you make an offer to show that you're a solid buyer. You don't. It's as simple as that. I have seen a case where someone in quite a large deal made a big thing about having liquidated investments to have funds available when they made the offer. It was on a deal for just over 2 million euros, and they had liquidated nearly 5 million worth of their funds to have in an account on the advice of their US lawyer and financial advisor, because they told them it would put them in a stronger position. They did all this before even speaking with anyone in France. They didn't need to do it. It didn't strengthen their position, and they were not very happy when they found out that this was the case, because they lost money. The funds were earning money where they were. And he didn't need to do it. If you're working with a real estate agency, it would be normal practice for them to ask you to see some sort of proof of funds at the time an offer is made. However, this can be in different currencies or across various accounts as long as they're tied to you and have your name. Importantly, funds aren't actually transferred until much later in the process. Once your offer is accepted and the legal paperwork starts, you'll be asked to pay a deposit, 5 to 10% is normal, into a protected notaire bank account. Often though, this is 4 to 6 weeks at least after your offer has been accepted. So you don't need anything at the time apart from proof that you can afford the property. The remainder of the funds are then not required to be paid until immediately before closing, which is usually several weeks after you've signed the first document and paid the deposit, but it could also be several months afterwards. Don't assume you'll need the funds straight away and potentially lose out on interest earned on your savings or miss out on some investment opportunity because you divested your stock position early. You've got time. Furthermore, currency fluctuations can severely impact your overall purchase price. It's always wise to work with a currency specialist rather than just traditional banks to get the timing right and to get the most euros for your dollars. Going the other way, we've also seen people who have a property to sell that think this is as good as cash. It's really not. However quickly you think the property is going to sell, they never sell as quickly as anyone thinks when they're in that position. And it can be really difficult to get an offer accepted in France before you've accepted an offer on the property that you're selling. One other thing we often see linked to these questions, despite what you may see online, you do not need to have a French bank account to purchase property in France. You absolutely don't. Will it make your life easier if you do further down the line? Yes, definitely. But you don't need to have one before you get to France. It's okay. So now we're on to number 5, mistakes not to make. If I'm a cash buyer, I can close quickly. This one might not cost you money, but it certainly might cause you some extra stress if you have unrealistic expectations. Again, if you've bought and sold multiple times in the US, you might have closed very quickly on certain deals. You might know that in the US, buyers can waive certain waiting periods, contingencies, inspections, etc., and that can accelerate the purchase process, meaning that closing can be very quick. You might think this could happen in France too. Well, I'm here to tell you that this is France. Things work at a French pace. In France, home purchases are governed by consumer protection law, and therefore, as a starting point, there's a mandatory 10-day cooling off period, called a buyer attraction period, after the first contract is signed. Furthermore, as title insurance or similar doesn't exist as a concept in France, the work undertaken by the notaires to verify and check the property and current ownership history and legality is quite a substantial piece of work and can take multiple weeks. Lastly, France has a vast array of preemption rights. Essentially, these are rights of first refusal for various government bodies, including sometimes the village the house is in, the department that the village is located in, and there's even a farmers' organisation that can have first right to buy land that could be used for farmers. And they all have minimum waiting periods of several months. Therefore, typical French purchases, even with cash buyers and very eager sellers, can take an average 3 to 4 months. While having cash available to invest quickly doesn't necessarily significantly speed up closing, it does eliminate financing contingencies and it makes your offer more attractive and certain. Plan for a minimum 3-month timeline from offer to keys. Notaire schedules are often very full and can be heavily impacted by key summer holiday periods and the end of the year holiday. It's not unusual to face several weeks of delays. However, certain preemption rights can be accelerated by paying an extra fee. For instance, the one for the French farmers, you can pay a fee and have it done in 72 hours rather than 2 months. Or your agent might be able to speak to the right people in the town hall or village hall and get things processed quicker if it's one of those preemption rights. As a real life example, last year there was a deal where an offer was accepted in April, cash buyer, very motivated seller. Based on what we've just learned, you'd think they closed maybe, July, August? When do you think the deal actually closed? Mainly due to there being 3 separate preemption rights that had to run one after the other, the deal didn't close till the 30th of December, believe it or not. My top tip here would be to get things in the notaire diary as soon as you can. Don't try and change a date over the summer holidays, and don't commit to an expense based on owning the property in the future before you have more certainty on a date. Okay, let's move on to mistake number 6, not to make. I know a property is good value or not based on price per metre squared. You might be thinking it's a common thing in the US, why wouldn't it be in France? Well, it's not. Well, almost not. There is a law in France called Loi Corrèze, which means that the surface area has a legal definition and has to be accurate, but that's only for co-ownership properties, so like apartment buildings. So for apartments, metre squared should be an accurate measure. What this means though is that for most houses in France, any metre squared you see, it's just an estimate. If you find out after you buy that it's smaller than the advertised metre squared, you don't have any legal recourse. Prices are not based on metre squared in France. Interestingly, for an apartment that is under the law, if you buy it and it's more than a certain percentage under, then you do have legal recourse and you can get some money back. The other point to note here is that unlike many countries, in France, accurate sale information, historical data, it's not readily available. If you find a property of interest and you try and look around for comps, there's basically no information, not recent anyway. There is a government website, but transactions before a certain date don't show up because they didn't introduce it until a certain date, and then it can take a few years for new transactions to show up. How relevant do you think a sale from 2 to 3 years ago is for your negotiation? Probably not very. If you're interested in learning more about how you can best search for a French property, I'll talk a little later about a course we have specifically developed that's aimed at this topic. Here we are. We find ourselves at mistake number 7, not to make. Thank you for still being here. This is the location given in the listings will be accurate. This one really can waste a lot of your time and be very frustrating. Because most sellers don't sign exclusive mandates with one agency, it's a very competitive market in France. It also means if a seller sells the property directly without the agency, which is quite common, there's no fee for the agent. If the listings gave the exact location, you could see the agency listing and all the work they spent on taking photos, advertising it, writing the description, and you could just turn up at the house and speak directly with the owner. This is the main reason why agents don't give out locations in advance. It's also why you won't see too many for sale signs, or à vendre in French, Also, it would mean that another agency would be alerted to the property and could easily go and try and sign a contract with the seller too. This is why, if it's not an exclusive listing, the town shown in the listing probably isn't even the town the property is actually located in. Well, I can hear you asking, how do you even search for a property if none of the locations are where they say they are? It's a fair question. So, we've looked at some problems today that other people have experienced. You might be worried about making a mistake too. Well, there's one solution to all these problems, whether you're looking to work with an agent or to go it alone by looking at FSBO listings. You can educate yourself and empower yourself to feel more confident and know that you're doing all the right things to find your dream French property. Well, who can help you become this new you that's more confident and knowledgeable? Well, the agent trying to sell you one of their properties is not going to educate you to avoid their fees if you are looking at FSBO properties. Even if you are looking to work with an agent, they don't have the time to explain how everything works to you before you're committed to buying one of their properties. They all work on a commission-only basis, so any time they spend with you, they don't get paid for unless you buy one of their properties. And they most likely won't have any experience of the US market to know what might be so different to you. A notaire is a very knowledgeable source about everything to do with French property, but they won't be interested in speaking with you until you've had an offer accepted on a property, and that's too late. Americans on social media who've already bought in France, yes, they've got good stories, it's entertaining, and they can tell you lots about their experience, but usually that experience is limited to searching for and buying one property in France. It's not going to cover everything that you need to know. We do have experience at French Property Focus of buying and selling in the US. We work in the French property market now, and we've developed an online course that covers all aspects of your search for a French property. Whether you're looking to work with an agent in France or you're exploring FSBO listings in France, we've got you covered. There's a lesson on where to search, including FSBO properties. There's a lesson on how to decode French language listings. We give you lots of key French terms and jargon to help you. There's a lesson on strategies when contacting FSBO listings, as well as a lesson on how to best work with an agent in France. It shows the importance of your first contact. There are even some template examples you can use in your first messages. There is a lesson looking at some strategies you can use to help you with the viewing of FSBO properties if you're feeling a little intimidated by the prospect. Seeing as how you could save maybe €30,000 on a €500,000 purchase, if you do explore the possibility, it might give you the budget for some alterations or additions that you didn't think you had. There's even a lesson where we look at some chateaus that aren't FSBO and I show you how you could potentially make them into FSBO properties. Here you can see a course summary showing all of the lessons that are included. You'll see at the end there's some bonus content, and that's because this is based on some feedback we had from the first people to buy the course, so the course is even bigger and better now. If you're ready to get serious about your search, come and join us at FrenchPropertyFocus.com and sign up today.